Hello, everybody. It is Sunday, March 21st. Welcome to spring. And I'm here this lovely Sunday morning with the amazing Jennifer Hayden, graphic novelist extraordinaire, who has just made a fantastic story for the recent Cleaver issue called The Fall of Man, which is an 18-panel comic which she created specifically for our issue, which is really incredible. So I have some questions I want to ask Jennifer, but hello, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm fine. I'm awake. There's a lot of sun coming in, so I have like white patches all over me. So enjoy.
Okay, thank you very much. So I just wanted to say that I've known Jennifer for a really long time. We've sort of began our correspondence over the internet in 2008. We both have this mutual love of comics. And Jennifer's love and kind of artistry with comics is just singular, and kind of her aim is completely true. She just keeps moving ahead with it. And what we're going to talk about today is that sort of aim, that love, how she does things, and how she kind of got into the comic scene. So my first question for you, Jennifer, is how did you get into the comic scene, and sort of how can you describe how that happened for you?
Well, I really got into the scene after I got into the medium. I had breast cancer in 2004, and I had to have a bilateral mastectomy, and it was kind of a shock in the middle of, it's a shock to anybody, but I had an eight-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a husband, and a lot of us were involved in this, and it was awful. It was short, it was like 7 weeks, and then I was fine. And after it was done, I really wanted to share the story with other women and help them not feel so alone or so afraid if it happened to them. And I had seen books that were out about it, and I had in the past tried to be a writer and tried to be an illustrator. And then I suddenly saw this New York Times article, and I always have to make the joke, if the New York Times is writing about anything in the arts, they're the last ones to hear about it. So I was one of the last people to hear about graphic novels. And I bought all the stack of graphic novels while I was recuperating to read them. And I only bought the ones by women. And I absolutely fell in love with the medium. I had never seen anything so flexible and all encompassing. It could hold every emotion, every thought that I had, and I felt like free. So I said, all right, I am going to do this breast cancer project, but I'm going to do it as a graphic novel. Then I found out that that wasn't such an original thought. There had been a couple of graphic novels out about breast cancer. Comics kind of lent themselves to graphic medicine, as it's called now. So at that point, I realized I had been kind of jonesing to write my life story at the ripe old age of 43. But things had happened, and I had strong opinions about them. So I decided to do a graphic novel that would be more like the reader was going through what I went through, which was living a life and then suddenly having this bombshell dropped on your life and having it have all of this meaning based on what your life had been like. So I call it a graphic novel about my life and my experience of breast cancer. So in the course of trying to sell this book, I started to, send away manuscripts and gather names. And then I realized I should be going to comics shows, and then I started meeting people and, connecting with other people like you who were doing work like this. And that led me to an entire social and professional life that I have loved ever since. And I love comics and they love me.
Well, it's such a welcoming community. I mean, that's what I found too, that it's just this wonderful sort of embracing place for people.
Hey, Emily, can you boost your volume a little bit? I hate to interrupt the dream, but I can't hear you as well as I can hear me.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but your voice is quiet. Maybe I'm deaf this morning. That could be it.
Okay, well, I think let's just take it from here and we'll see how it goes. And if it's not good, we'll do a redo.
Okay. It's gonna be great.
Okay, so I just wanted to talk about The Fall of Man, which you basically just created. It did not exist prior to a month ago. And what I got from it was it's the everyday routine fused with poetry. That's what I get from your work. And I kind of want you to talk about what you were going for with the story. What's the title about? What are the references? Just give it to us.
Hmm. Um, Actually, I almost feel like I have to take it out to do this, at least to remind myself, because it's sort of like when I put things in the file cabinet, they're sort of gone. Well, the Fall of Man started when you contacted me because we're on Facebook together, and I always, whenever anybody writes a great Facebook post, I always think, don't give away the plums, man. You know, you got to save that. You got to put that in a comic or a story. And so I had, but I'm working on a long range project, and so I haven't been doing a lot of short comics at all. But I had been writing these Facebook posts about what my household was going through during quarantine, and you just said, you know, looks like you guys have been going through some stuff, man. Can you do something about it? And I realized, oh my God, I really, 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 really want to do this. I have a lot of like catharsis to get out here. So I dove in just in once with me, once I have a title, then I know what the story is. So I went through a series of titles. And when I reached Fall of Man, that was the title, because it seemed to me that we are in an age right now during quarantine of losing our innocence about certain things that we took for granted. And that included political innocence during the reign of Trump, and also our kind of scientific innocence with having our lives ruined for a solid year to 18 months by something that we thought science had already eradicated, you know? But I also liked the idea that my man had fallen. I didn't like it, but it worked in the story. And that was our big home event. In the middle of quarantine, my husband slid down the stairs in socks. The cleaning lady had left too much junk on the floor. Neither of us had been smart enough to clean it up, and he went sailing and held onto the banister with his left hand and wrenched. He just tore everything up here. So he's been in this long recovery. And so not only did we have to go through quarantine, but we had to take care of him while we went through quarantine, and also go through the medical system while we were in quarantine. And I'm sorry, but it's really weird when they're telling you, do not get into a small space with a stranger, and you're in there constantly and then you're in like the emergency room for 8 solid hours, which we were with masks on, but it felt really strange. So Fall of Man starts with my husband falling down the stairs and goes on for a while. And as I was drawing it, I realized it's the first time I drew anything about quarantine. I had never drawn myself wearing a mask. And I have a huge nose in my pictures and sort of in real life. And so I had to figure out how to does the mask go under the nose? No, that's not the way you wear the mask. Put it over the nose. So you get so anyway, you can see that in the first panel. But I realized as I was drawing it, and then I missed his fall. I was at the post office. So I have me at the post office. And then I realized, but that's not normal either. We've got, the plastic sheet hanging down between me and the guy who's selling me the stamps. We've got the circle, like the romper room circles on the floor that we have to stand in like toddlers. The Purell stand to sanitize everything all the time. And I started to realize that what I was really writing about was what was crazy about quarantine. And so the story is, it just is sort of covering the insanity of this time. And I also, shortly after he hurt himself, very shortly, a deer sailed out into the side of my car, and it was really amazing. I've had this happen once before, 11 years ago, but this time it was this whomp into the side of my car. And then as I sat there going, yep, this is happening, my window exploded right next to my head. And I'm just really glad that I had a hat on. And all the stuff I was wearing is still on the floor of my basement because I can't figure out how to get the glass out of it.
Wow.
I was dressed to go for a walk, right? So I'm just, and I drove off into a field and I sat there showered with glass. And so that feeling of just being sailing through life with all this crap happening and none of it making any sense was what I wanted to convey. And I am so grateful to you for asking me to write this because I got it out, you know. We're still all fallen, but I don't know, people are getting vaccinated. It could happen to you.
Yeah, it actually happened to me on Friday. I can't believe it. But
Oh,
anyway, I can't get over how you take these moments in life, and make them into this kind of art. You make each moment becomes a piece of art, really. So everything is fleshed out. The specifics, the details that you add in, like the detail in the post office image of the screen. Your ability to transform the everyday into art is really extraordinary.
thank you. I mean, I think this is the challenge of comics, of indie comics for grown-ups, which is, you know, the field I'm in. And I think it's funny, the further I go in comics, the more I'm comfortable with the poetic aspect. I went in with very much more of a prose attitude towards the words. The images I was pretty freewheeling with from the beginning, but I love. But ultimately, I'm in it to tell the story. But the story is always, if it's a short one, the story isn't very long. And really, what you're talking about is a poetic moment, a moment that you're giving words and images around so that it can expand, so that the ripples can be felt and can move out, and the reader can be in the center of it as well. I do, you know, I was talking to a younger artist, my niece, and the subject came up of just how you relate to your reader, your audience. And I realized that when I was young, I didn't have as much love for my audience as I do now. And there's just I think it came with, you know, brush with death, but after post breast cancer, I just loved being alive and I loved everything and everybody except a few people, Donald Trump. And but you know, I'm loving them. I'm giving them my heart. You know, I think that's really important for us to exchange that, and artists don't always get far enough in to do that, or they have enough of a difficulty relating to others that they can't give at that moment. So you know, that's the part of art that I love, and tying myself to the chair to do it is the hard part, but wanting to share it is the easy part.
It's really, really, really beautiful. Can you talk a little bit about the story of your Tits from 2015 and possibly go into a little bit about what you're working on right now?
Yeah, so the story of my Tits obviously was the breast cancer book that I ended up doing as my first project in comics, and it took forever. It was the first one I started, but like the second one that I finished. So you're talking about you're asking me how I made it. So it went on in different phases. It took me 8 years to complete. It's 352 pages. And all I used was an outline and a timeline, a very rough outline. The outline was like a paragraph for a chapter, and the chapters were like 40 pages. But I knew, you know, when I had the timeline done, I knew, okay, well, we're going to go from this person's death to this kid's birth, and and this one is going to be mom's recovery to this, to here. And once I cut it up, I knew where the story arcs were. So each chapter is a very conscious sort of mini novel of itself. And I was just reading comics along the way. Nobody was critiquing my work. I wasn't doing it while studying anywhere. It was very much done alone in the woods, the way I wanted to do it, which I had to have that freedom because I had done a ton of writing, which I used to fill up a wastebasket every day. Write, throw it all out. Next day, start over again, write the same chapter 9 times, throw it all out. And it was just horrifying. And then when I got into children's books, I was doing these pictures, but the images were, it's like submit to send a sketch. Now put the sketch in the light box. Now render it in ink. Now color it. Now it's like by the end, I was, this kid looks like this kid doesn't want to be in this picture anymore. I am really done with this. And comics gave me a chance to spend 5 minutes on the I didn't even use a pencil at first for a long time, actually. I think for that whole book, I wasn't using a pencil unless I had like a doorway or something definite. But for people, I just let them appear however they were going to appear. Otherwise, I was never going to do this thing. And the story just kept pulling together. It was like I have to say, it was like knitting. Like it's crazy, but all the things that I was good at came together when I found comics, okay? Silly drawing, spontaneous drawing, funny drawing, expressive drawing, poetry, which I wrote a whole bunch of when I was in my teens. And now I think I'm almost returning to it within comics. Storytelling, which, you can't shut me up. I mean, I'm always telling stories. And a lot of the stories in the story of my Tits were stories that I'd told a million times, drunk, sober, across the kitchen table, to anybody who would listen. They were stories that had been perfected. It was my stand-up, I had it ready. It was in the chamber, ready to release. And the other thing I had done for years was try to write and try to crystallize what I wanted to say and never say it with too many words or too many long words. And when I suddenly only had this teeny little box, top of the box to put it in, because I stole Linda Barry's format. And I told her later, I at a bar, I ran into her and she went, "Oh, who cares? It's not patented." She was like, "This stuff isn't copyrighted. I'm glad you could do it." And as a teacher, of course, she was psyched to have, helped somebody. So once I was limited in the number of words I could put in, I was able to limit the words, and I was able to choose them more carefully. And that's the poetic aspect to me of comics. You have to choose just the right words. And so in doing that, I mean, it can be very informal and blabby, but it can also be very crystalline.
Yeah, I like to call it the economy of language, because you really, really need to kind of decide what it is you're putting in and what you're taking out. Can you describe your drawing process? Like, how do you kind of go about that?
I used to never pencil. I'm thinking the sun has moved enough for me to show my desk. I've got always I start with this, which is my template, and I draw, and I've got lines on it for if I'm going to have one line of narration, 2 lines, 3 lines, 4 lines. I draw the box and I draw the line for the narration, which I've already come up with first in here. I use a notebook right next to me all the time. And then I write in the text, and then I draw the picture. This is because I don't repeat things. Oh, you can't see anything here. Okay, good. Here's one in pen and ink. So you're looking at, so I'm filling this in, and then I'm filling in the image. And in the story of my Tits, I did this all in just in ink. And now, to save my hand, which is aging, thank you, I do I pencil in the drawing and then I ink over it. And now, instead of doing all the cross-hatching I used to do just in pen and ink to fill in the values inside the drawing and the details and texture, I do that with a black watercolor pencil. And I have another book I'm working on that'll be color, so I also sometimes do it in paint and watercolor pencil.
Interesting.
It's just, but and I keep trying to simplify, and it keeps taking me too much time, so that's it.
Well, it's so interesting to hear how it all comes about. How you settle on your the page format, the layout, the text, how many lines are going to be in there. It's so interesting. Why do you like what do you like about the autobio comic genre? What is that about?
Well, I didn't give it a thought when I started. I just had my own story to tell. So of course it was going to be autobio. And then 2 years in, I hadn't mentioned this yet, I started doing Underwire, which was, I'd been invited by a comics hub in Brooklyn to contribute a monthly column basically, but a monthly comic. And I settled on the name Underwire. It came out as a book a couple of years later because I persuaded my publisher that I needed a warm-up book while I spent 100 years finishing this other thing I'd already promised them. And as I thought about what I would do as a short comic, I didn't want to do fiction. I didn't want to do fantasy. I didn't want to do something. I still wanted to remain within my life, but what I wanted to do was, rather than a memoir, I wanted to do my present life, because the memoir was getting heavy and I wanted to have a break and do stuff that was just very ephemeral around, and now this is called mom comics, and a lot of other women have done them. And I, of course, have, my great pioneering mom comics, but there were other pioneers before me, trust me, have been forgotten, sadly. But the idea of basically going from a novel to a short story, that's how it felt. It didn't feel like I was moving to a poem, but it felt like I was moving to a short story, and I was taking the same, again, it was love of what was going on around me, loving an exchange with a child or something that had just happened that was making me realize something about life. And so that kept on being what I wanted to do. The book I'm working on now is about a trip I took, so I'm calling it a graphic travel novella about a trip to France that was dreadful, like all my trips to France. And then suddenly the sun came out and it was wonderful. And there seemed to be a lot in there. And unfortunately, it's going to be more than 160 pages long. I intended it to be 40 pages long. So it's going where it's going, man. And I'm working on an graphic anti-cookbook, I'm calling it, for Top Shelf, which will mix comics and terrible recipes. I'm a horrible cook, and I'm completely conflicted and horrified by food and preparing it for my family. And that one's in color, so it's taking a little longer. But it's what is happening here? It's just always the question. What is happening here? What is happening to me? But you know what? It's happened to everybody else too. So why don't I just talk about it? That's the revelation of autobiography. After I went through my breast cancer, I thought, my mother was always such a reservoir of pain, because I think she thought she was ashamed of it and she wasn't going to talk about it for a second. And after watching this, I think my feeling was, what makes you think your pain is different from anyone else's? We've all got the same pain, and we all need to share it. And then maybe if we all hold each other's pain and, show each other how we held our own pain, we'll all do better with it, and be able to survive better.
That is so true and so powerful. And I think people, when people read other people's experiences, it really does help them to realize that they aren't alone. And it's the whole community thing is incredible. Do you ever worry about oversharing or basically embarrassing someone in your life or that kind of thing?
I should, but I don't. And with age, I have gotten a little more discreet, but I think I started out, even though my family would say no, more discreet than some, because I think autobiography, the key thing is and memoir has to be done with taste. So you need to screen sometimes, and you need to cut someone out if that's not going to be good, or if it's really their story, not your story. And I realized that I overshared in a lot of places, but somehow the only way this work gets done is if you can pretend it's never going to see the light of day. I think all the arts are that way. You cannot be self-conscious when you're playing music, even. Right. Which I do. You have to pretend you're the only person in the room. You got to play it for yourself. If you start thinking about the other people, you're going to come apart. And I just thought that this was important. And in the long run, although my daughter claims that I screwed her up for life, and my husband was like on the border of divorcing me. They swear that they're glad ultimately that I did it. But you have to understand that routinely at a dinner party or out with my kids, I'll say something that will just send them screaming, and they can't believe that I said it. They said that I most closely resemble the mom on Schitt's Creek. Have you watched that?
Right. Yes.
And Moira
Right.
Rose says things that make your hair just crawl back along your skull. And I didn't know, I think it's kind of my role in life. I think I do that. I try not to do it all the time. I'm a pretty normal person, but I don't really give a F a lot of the time. So yeah.
Oh, good. I mean, I think that's really what does make good art. And like I was just going to say, your humor it's hilarious. It can be inappropriate. It's unsentimental. I mean, your look at life is unsentimentalized, but yet full of love. And I think that's the really interesting thing, right? It's warts and all. It's awkward. It can be whatever, but it's totally full of love.
Well,
And
that I love.
Hmm?
That's a great comment, because that is how I feel about it. And I realize I have to give my husband a certain amount of credit for, I've known him since I was 20. We've been together since I was 20, and I just turned 60. Woo! I'm really into it. And so he and I have basically never stopped like having this back and forth about what we've gone through. And I'm convinced that I wouldn't have done comics to some extent if it hadn't been for him. Our way together of processing all of the phases of life we've gone through and everything that's happened has been so sort of dry and hysterical, but full of feeling. And I mean, there are scenes that are really completely true, like going into the hospital in The Story of My Tits to see his mother who'd had a lung cancer operation, and she was breathing into one of these things where the ball has to go up to reinflate her lungs. And we walked into the hospital room, and she goes, "You like my new exercise thing?" And Steve goes, "God, Mom, I thought it was a bong." And there's just like, there's something about living with somebody who says, like, you think I say the wrong stuff. His mother, they were famous for it. But I think that those are those are the moments, the holes you punch, and then you see life through them. You've just punched through the bullshit, and what you can then see is the whole vista.
Exactly. And that is what is interesting. That's what's interesting about life, is the vista, not the facade. And you go completely behind that sort of uninteresting facade, right? Into the world of your world. Anything else you want to share with us?
Let's think. No, I mean, I will say that it's been amazing to have my first studio. I've had it for less than a year. What you see behind me, this enormous room. We moved to this house 6 years ago, and I was supposed to have this room, and my husband, we were going to make a music spot in the garage, but we couldn't afford it. We finally did it right before quarantine. So quarantine has been made much easier by us each having nice big workspaces, and especially because our daughter's with us. But it's been amazing to take all the stuff that had been crammed into the corners of bedrooms all these years that I, worked in, and lay them out the way I want to, so that the process that I want to have is easy. And I will say that this was the most incredible purchase I made, and it is one of these kitchen like chopping block thingies with 3 levels. And this is what I drag around, whether I'm at a sitting desk or a standing desk, with a working copy of my current book, the current amount of artwork I need out, and then notes on the bottom. And this is in addition to what's all over my desk. And And it's the most hilarious. I'm just like dragging it around if I want to read some of it, if I want to be standing, sitting. So finding your workspace, making it work for you, and making your body comfortable. I mean, I have scoliosis, and that gets worse with time. So I'm doing a lot to keep myself comfortable. But having a workspace that works for you, I'm realizing physically, I have to put in an ad for it because it's an amazing treat, but it's really great for the longevity of your work.
Oh, yeah. I could not agree more. Could not agree more. Well, I really thank you so much for inviting us into your studio this morning and for really kind of sharing the tremendous process of how you put these stories together, which are, I think they're just going to keep getting more and more fruitful and precious as you go along. I'm really excited to see what comes next.
Oh, thank you. And I absolutely love seeing your paintings in the background. You have the fine art gene that I completely lack. I wouldn't know what to do with a big fat canvas, and your work is so amazing.
Well, we'll see.
You can do both. You're lucky.
We'll see. I mean, I bet if I got you in here, we could get you painting. All right, let's have a, I think this is it then. Let's have a look and we'll see how it goes, and that's it.
Okay.
All right.
Good. Thank you so much, Em.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.